This episode is brought to you by Upsonder, the easiest way to monetize your drone. With the industry's only $1 million protection coverage free to its members, Upsonder is the top choice among certified drone pilots to get up and stay up. To get started, create your free listing today at upsonder.com. Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith. Hey everybody, and welcome to Commercial Drones FM. Today I'm sitting here in a hotel in San Francisco with our guest, Norm Lamothe of Deveron UAS out of Toronto, Canada. He's a farmer, and a quick fun fact is that Norm was actually, and I'm not even making this up, Mr. October in the farming calendar from his province. So welcome to the show, Norm. Is that true?
Yeah, it is, Ian. Thanks for having us. I was part of the Food and Farm Care. Ontario is the group that puts on the farming calendar on an annual basis, and I've had the pleasure and luxury of working with them over the last year, and it was a great opportunity. They asked me to be their poster child, and it was a lot of fun.
Total farming stud muffin. You know what we're going to have to do is we're going to actually have to make the episode picture that picture if they'll allow us to use it, or if you have full-blown rights for it. So
I have full-blown rights. I'll send it to you.
Oh, yes. Okay. So you will see the album artwork of this. It's glorious. And Norm, you are a real farmer, are you not?
I am a farmer, and funny enough, if you were to look back 3 or 4 years, I wouldn't have said that I would find myself in the drone space here today. It was actually, I left a 10-year career in aviation to pursue the family farm. And one of our local farmers in the area, knowing that I had some background in aviation, was attending some shows in the U.S., and he recognized at that point in time that drones were going to play a role in agriculture and suggested I look into the space. I did that in early 2015, and through that process decided that we were going to make a move on a piece of hardware at that time. Signed up a few local growers who were supportive of the technology, and we used the technology throughout 2015. Quickly realized that drones had a space in agriculture, and there was a tremendous opportunity to help growers increase their yields and decrease their inputs. And I was already thinking of a natural expansion when I met the company that I'm currently working for now, and that is a company that we co-founded together with our CEO, Dave McMillan, and it's called Deveron UAS. Devron UAS is a commercially listed company on the Toronto, or on the stock exchange in Canada. And for me, it was an awesome opportunity to expand on something that I was already thinking of doing, using the public vehicle. And for Devron, it was a unique opportunity to get into the space with someone that was doing something in the field in real time. So my family and I, we farm about a 500-acre plot near Toronto, Ontario. Mix of corn, soy, wheat. We also have a small maple syrup operation and a market garden.
And I can attest to the deliciousness of that maple syrup. You mentioned I'm actually a little bit shocked. 2015 is when you started using drones. So you've done 2 grow seasons now. Yeah,
I jumped in with both feet forward and really took a liking to the industry. I had followed the UAV space quite a bit previously. My last job in aviation was as an insurance broker, and we were insuring. We were a primary lead insurer on a lot of UAVs in Canada. So I had been following the space quite closely from that perspective. I knew what was going on. I saw that there was a lot of activity in it, and I knew that there was an opportunity for us to use my background in aviation, but also my knowledge of agriculture to bring it to growers.
That's awesome. And so Devron, what kind of company is Devron? I mean, you guys are based in Toronto, Canada. You're publicly traded on the Canadian stock market, which is awesome. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But what exactly is it that you guys do in agriculture with drones?
Yeah, so Devron's a full-service remote sensing company, and we focus 100% on agriculture. So through a fleet of pilots and drones, we go out and collect data that we use to help growers, like I said, increase yields and decrease inputs across a variety of crops. And we work with a lot of software and analytics partners to help provide some ROI for those growers.
And when you say decrease inputs, what is the purpose of decreasing inputs, and what are inputs for those that are listening that might not be aware?
Yeah, inputs are the three big ones. They're seeds, they're fertilizer, and they're chemical products or crop protection products. So farmers have to use all three of those products in order to sustain a crop in the field. And what we're looking to do is have farmers use those more efficiently. So whether that's decreasing fertilizer inputs to get the same yield, whether that's decreasing a crop protection or not using a crop protection product where it's not needed. And the same goes for seeds. We have the technology now to do a lot of variable rate seeding in the fields, and we're helping growers create the zones through the imagery and the remote sensing that we gather from the air to allow them to place those seeds more efficiently and more effectively in the fields.
Excellent. So I heard you say zones as well, so I'm picking up on all the things that I've been learning, and we'll go over zones in a little bit. I'll kind of request that we go over, I want to hear ideally a story or two, maybe some of your big successes using drones in ag. I know, for example, we've talked about probably at least 5 or 6 cases. I think we collaborated on a case study that we wrote quite a while ago. It was not even a year. Well, maybe it was a year ago, actually, about a year ago on the Drone Deploy blog. But anyways, maybe you can tell me about a specific time that you used a drone on a field and you were really successful with it, and you found some insight that you normally might not have discovered.
Yeah, I mean, we did the soybean case study with Drone Deploy in 2015, and that was, a real opener for anyone who is looking into drones and determining how the grower is going to get a return on investment for using remote sensing in agriculture. What we've found through the process of using UAVs in ag is that you need a lot of data. You need a lot of data to be able to do proper analytics, and anyone can collect data in the field. But collecting good data is very difficult to do. And as a commercial service provider, that's where our focus lies. The opportunities for agriculture, the way I see it, are areas that are prescriptable and areas that are predictable. So anytime you can take an image and use it to do a prescription, whether that be for fertilizer, for water management, for disease and pest control, and apply that to the field on a variable rate scale or reducing what you would normally do as what I would call a normal practice, tremendous opportunity for return on investment. The second area that I see as potential moving forward is areas that are predictable. So that's using remote sensing to identify a problem in the field before you can see it with the naked eye. And those are the holy grail items for us in agriculture, but we've seen tremendous headway in some of the things that we're seeing already. And I think as we gather more data, there'll be more and more opportunities for that. So we're going to be publishing a few case studies at the end of this growing season on where those ROIs are. And as a grower, I'll be the first one to tell you that if you show up at my door trying to sell me something, if you're not going to be able to provide me a 2-to-1 or a 3-to-1 return on my investment, I'm not interested. And so we're looking to demonstrate to growers areas where we can fly the field. The grower pays the cost of having a drone there to collect the data, and then they're able to make a decision where they're able to get that 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 or 4 or 5 in certain circumstances. One real exciting one has to do with variable rate nitrogen and using a prescription based.
Real quick, variable rate meaning, and this has to do with the zones, right? The zones on the area. So I'm taking this down a couple notches because I'm really passionate about helping the other people absorb and learn, people that don't know ag too well, and understand that you can't just provide someone an Ndvi map as well and call it a day and brush your hands clean. But variable rate application and zones, what does that mean?
Yeah, so a normal practice would be you would put down a product at a standard rate and you would apply that rate over an entire field. So
fertilizer or something?
Fertilizer, water, a crop protection product, foliar nutrient product or program that you have in your crops. So you would just go through and you would put down the exact same rate across the entire field. Now we're breaking that down into different zones. So we're looking at areas where plants have a stronger health, a medium health, and a poor health. And we're identifying areas where there's potential for that crop to reach a full maturity or a higher yield. And we're either increasing or decreasing the products that we're using in relation to how the plants are going to respond to that. So in nitrogen, for instance, if you had an area that was flooded out or an area that was drought stricken, why would you give that area more nitrogen? If it doesn't have the water and it doesn't have the capacity to become a full mature crop in that area, then why would we bother putting more money in fertilizer to just watch it do nothing? So the idea of variable rate nitrogen applications is to feed the crops that are going to do well and have the potential to do well. So we've got some really great case studies that we're going to publish. One of them has to do with nitrogen in potatoes. Potatoes require a lot of nitrogen, and typically the applications of nitrogen are split out over several applications throughout the year. So between images and information that we gather with the remote sensing, we can go in and look to see what the changes have been, and then identify areas where nitrogen is required and where nitrogen's not required. And the grower, rather than just putting the same standard rate on every so many weeks, he's able to, or she's able to modify that to a variable rate and ultimately save money.
And how are these applications, how are they actually applied to the field? What tools are used to do that?
Yeah, so it's equipment on the ground. It's tractors. There'll be spreaders. That those applications can be either as a dry fertilizer or as a liquid fertilizer. And every operation is different. And that's one of the challenges in using remote sensing, is that the farmer still has to have the ability to go into the field and make the timely applications based on the information that we gather from the drone.
Gotcha. And so we mentioned NDVI, maps, and their slight misconceptions around those. I mean, I know we've talked about this before. Again, this is a recurring theme, but maybe you can talk about what is the value of an NDVI map to you?
NDVI on its own, it's not a new technology. It's been around for a very long time. Gathering quality data is something that we strive for in our business and in our commercial offering. If you fly a field one day, you should be able to go back and fly that field the next day and get very similar NDVI values. If you're not using calibrated imagery to do that, you're not getting that. And if you're using that imagery to then make a prescription decision, that imagery has to be calibrated. So it's very important. NDVI is a starting block of what we're going to see agriculture develop into through the use of remote sensing, but it's a very basic tool to be used at this point in time, I would say.
But you're not just going to go ahead and you're not going to take a drone up, create a near infrared data set, NDVI map, and then hand that over to a grower and say, here you go, give me my $200 or whatever it is.
Yeah, no, there's so much more to it. That's just one piece of the puzzle. I mean, in my opinion, drones have been a little bit oversold in agriculture. There's a lot of myths about what drones can do. Anyone can go to a local store and buy a very low-priced drone and use it in the field. But whether or not they can actually use it to make decisions that will have a return on investment for them is a completely different story. Even the NDVI, it's that one little piece of a puzzle, and there's so many other factors that you need to take into consideration: the weather, the topography, the historical fertilizer applications of those fields, historical yields and variability, and where does that NDVI map fit into that field over the historical variability? Is it the same, or are we looking for hot spots that are outside of that norm?
Gotcha. Norm.
Sorry, no pun intended.
Yeah. No, I kind of threw that one out there. So there's some misconceptions out there. It's safe to say there are also reports by, I don't even know, Goldman Sachs or some of these other large organizations that do studies that predict that agriculture might be the leading industry using drones. Do you agree, disagree, or what are you kind of seeing in that regard?
Yeah, I think the Economist in 2015 predicted that agriculture would be 80% of drone use moving forward. Agriculture is unique in that it's large, it's vast. We have millions upon millions of acres across North America in agriculture. It's a huge industry. It's controlled by very few players more and more. There's less farmers out there. And the interesting thing about agriculture is that there's opportunities for recurring revenue. So unlike other industries where they're one-off opportunities, agriculture it's repeatable business, and it's important to gather historical data and to continue to collect data on a regular basis in agriculture, because it does give you quite a bit of change over time as well.
What do you think are some of the biggest opportunities? Actually, no. I'm totally going to rephrase this. If you had to design the perfect ag drone, what would some of its specs be?
Yeah, I mean, we use both rotary wing and fixed wing drones and UAVs in our fleet, and they both have a place. The rotary wings just aren't efficient enough to gather large acreage like the fixed wings are. They both have a place. There's sites and locations where we've showed up and we've actually had to call in a different type of UAV just based on the landscape that we're dealing with, the type of terrain that we have to land and take off from. I think we're going to see probably in the next few years some really interesting vertical takeoff and landing UAVs and drones that are going to come on the marketplace that will fit both of those needs. The quadcopters are nice. You can get a great, low and over view with them, but they just don't have the efficiency to do mass acres. We also have some regulatory restrictions as to how big and how far we can go with our drones, and that's line of sight right now. As we start to progress to beyond line of sight, we're going to have a much more efficient method of collecting data on a larger scale, and we look forward to that as well.
Have you ever used a quadcopter for getting aerial data of a field?
Yeah, absolutely. We have 2 quadcopters in our fleet, and I use one on a regular basis. It's sort of a research platform for us. We have 3 cameras on it, and we can cover 40 or 50 acres with it. And if it's a larger field, we can easily swap the batteries. And the software planning platforms like Drone Deploy has is an example of the ease of use of that type of technology. And yeah, they both have a place, and we have them both in our fleet.
Nice. Yeah. So I think there's a lot of people that actually think that quadcopters cannot do agricultural work because they don't have as much range, but in reality they can be quite flexible. Okay, cool. So speaking of back to like the story part of this, maybe you can tell me about a specific time where you used a drone on a field and what you uncovered, like maybe a specific field or a specific crop, and what did it allow you to do afterwards?
Yeah, so we had severe drought in Ontario this year. It was I believe province-wide, it was one of the worst seasons in 75 years. And I know on our own farm, we had what we call a 100-year drought. So it was multi-generational dry conditions. And with those dry conditions comes disease pressure. So plants are vulnerable. They're under a lot of stress, and disease comes in and sets in insects and pests. So we had spider mites, which is not a common pest for our crops. But they do thrive very well in that type of environment. So we had quite a few growers call us out to identify the percentage of a field that was affected by spider mites. So they knew they had the pressure. They didn't know how severe it was. They didn't know if it was over a threshold and whether or not they needed to do anything to mitigate it. And in several circumstances, we went out, we identified the percentage of the fields that had spider mite damage. They were then able to go in and mitigate that with crop protection products.
How did you, what part of the data did you use? Like the orthomosaic? Was there near infrared imagery involved?
Yeah, we're using near infrared and NDVI in that situation to identify the areas that are stressed. And again, you need boots on the ground. So we would go to those stressed areas, identify how bad it was, and then knowing what the relative map of the field was, able to identify the zones in the areas that needed to be mitigated. And so there's a perfect example of the variable zone application.
Okay.
So rather than spraying the entire field, they would just spray a portion of that field.
That is awesome. Okay. What about the future? I mean, what do you see for the future of drones in ag? I mean, you guys are heavily invested in that, specifically with Deveron UAS. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, where do you see the space going, evolving? Give us a little bit of insight right there.
Yeah, we're very excited about the potential for things like machine learning and inputting a ton of data into some of the predictive models. if we're able to identify signatures of areas that have had problems in the past, and if we're able to say, this disease is showing up in this band at this point in time, given these weather conditions, and we're able to pump all those images and all that information into a machine learning tool, that's pretty exciting, because then we can really scale up the business that we're doing. I think there's a lot of opportunities to blend existing data along with the remote sensing information that we gather. And there's a lot of platforms out there right now that are really piquing our interest as well.
Cool. So full disclosure, everyone who's listening, I'm sure you heard the cacophony of San Francisco tourists inside the hotel computer room that we're recording this in. So that was actually hilarious. There was a printing problem and quite a few senior citizens working feverishly together to try to fix that. So apologies for any background noise and losses of train of thought there. I think, Norm, you did an excellent job of keeping your concentration there, so that was excellent. I'm more impressed by the minute here. So our guests have left us for now. Okay, the last kind of thing I want to touch on is the venture exchange. So as previously mentioned, you guys are a publicly listed company on the Canadian Securities Exchange under the ticker symbol DVR. That's Delta Victor Romeo. How is that? I mean, like, I can invest in your company right now if I wanted to?
Yeah, absolutely. We're a publicly traded company. Our stocks trade freely on the Canadian Securities Exchange, and any individual through their broker could access those shares and take part in the company's successes.
That's awesome. And so that's an interesting strategy for you guys to take. But the way I understand it is that it's a little bit different over in Canada and that specific region than here in Silicon Valley, where there's all these VCs and they'll just throw money around, millions of bucks. What's the thought process in taking that route?
Yeah, for us, it was Devron was a publicly traded company before it entered into drones. It was in the mining space, and it's a perfect vehicle for the company to grow and for us to access capital as is needed. So right now we were focused in Ontario in 2016, and as we're looking to expand westerly and southerly, it's an opportunity for us to access additional capital as needed for hardware purchases and expansion plans, and it's a very efficient method for us to grow.
Fascinating. So you can invest. If you're listening and you want to, you can invest. Canadian Securities Exchange, ticker symbol Delta Victor Romeo. Norm, one last question is, what kind of advice, what's one piece of advice, if there's a young whippersnapper, maybe getting out of high school, someone very entrepreneurial, maybe it's someone older and looking for a career change and they want to use drones in ag, what kind of advice would you give them? I mean, lessons learned, things that they need to be very confident in doing and being able to deliver at a high level and consistency. What would you say to that?
Yeah, there's so much more to collecting imagery in agriculture than just taking a drone out of the box and saying that you have a service. There's multiple layers, and I've touched on this so many times. Collecting good data is extremely important. Agriculture is a very complex system. It's become very scientific, and it's a unique space to operate in for us, but it's a difficult one to come into. The other thing I would touch on is that hardware is a commodity. There's so many drones out there, there's so many sensors out there, and there's so many software and analytics tools out there. And really what we've been able to do and how we've differentiated ourselves as a service company is the ability to integrate all of those into one another, and the ability to be able to shift and change our decisions related to those on a yearly basis. The space is changing so fast. The prices of UAVs and the technology is improving constantly. Even if you look at where we started and where we're going to be next year, we'll be on our third and fourth model of UAVs just through that very short time period. So it's very difficult for someone to keep up with the technology on a small scale, and that's one of the reasons why we tout that we're a service company and we take on a lot of that risk for growers. So we're able to do it much more efficiently than anyone could ever internalize those costs at a commercial scale.
I totally agree, man. You guys are doing a heck of a job. You can go ahead and you can follow Deveron UAS on Twitter at Deveron UAS. That's Deveron. And you can follow Norm himself at Woodley Farms on Twitter, which is really interesting because he's posting pictures from the field in a real farm, doing real work on it, on the ground with the boots in the dirt. So Woodley is spelled Woodleigh. Thank you so much for the maple syrup delivery over here back in San Francisco. I'm going to restock my pantry, and you can check out the website for Devron at deveronuas.com. Keep an eye out for those case studies from you guys. I'm super stoked and really, really interested in reading them. A lot has changed in a year, as you know. So thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks again, Norm, for your time. You can follow the podcast at Drones Podcast on Twitter. Hit us up on Facebook, facebook.com/Drones Podcast, and shoot us a note. If you have any follow-up questions for Norm, I'm sure I can accost him and get him to provide an answer. But appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ian. It was great being here. We'll have to have you up in Canada next time.
Absolutely. I've been meaning to make that trip. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Cheers.